Previewing Week 11 in Fredericksburg area high school football, that means we have reached the end of the regular season. One game left for these teams to be able to make their playoff push. Let's take a look at the playoff picture, and we'll start with the 1A East and the 2A East. We've got a couple of teams from the area that are going to be playing each other in this.
Yeah, Colonial Beach and Washington Lee, and like a big rivalry game. You know they both want to win this thing, and it matters huge for both of them. Colonial Beach has rallied their way back into the playoff picture. Their strength of schedule is borne out. They're the 12 seed out of 12. I don't think they improve to better than 12. Maybe with a win, maybe they move out of 12. But I think with the loss, they're still going to be in. You're still looking at a game against Franklin or Rappahannock in the first round, an opponent you're familiar with. I think the Drifters are happy after the way their season has gone. They're happy to roll their dice with that.
Okay, there you go with the gambling. So you have told me several years now. I don't know how, is this our fourth year doing this? I've lost track. It feels like 20.
It seems like infinite.
Yes. A chip and a chair. That's all you can hope for. All that you can ask for if you, particularly if you're on the lower half of that playoff schedule. Colonial Beach 3-6 on the season, and they've got their playoff hopes alive. They may get to play a Week 11.
They got a chance.
Or an 11th game.
I think they've got a good shot to do that. Washington Lee, they're playing to stay at home in the first round. They're still in the bottom half of the top half of the 2A East. They need a win to make sure they're going to play at least one game at home, where you're going to play, someone like George Mason or Greensville or Central of Woodstock, something like that.
Okay.
But you got a chance to play at home.
Awesome. So big time in 1 and 2. How about we move up to Conference 3 or Division 3?
Region. The 3A East, of course.
3A East.
James Monroe. Here we go. I've got a just ironclad lock for you. James Monroe will be the 2 seed in their pod in the 3A East. Hopewell's going to be number 1. Yep. James Monroe is going to be number 2. The rest of the 3A East is a complete mess with a bunch of big games here at the last week. The Culpeper-Brentsville game is a massively, hugely important game for this last week of the season. I think the winner of that game is probably the 3 seed in the 3A East. I think James Monroe probably plays the winner of that game in the second round of the playoffs, assuming JM does what they need to do. And then Spotsy's got an edge to be the 8 seed, but all those teams, Armstrong, Petersburg, Spotsylvania, John Marshall, all those teams are right in the mix. They're all teams that have been winning challenged this year. Whoever can manage to find a win in this last week, they all have got tough matchups. Whoever can find a win out of those has got a chance to be 4 or 5 to really set themselves apart. And the other ones are going to be counting on rider points and so on. I like Spotsy in as the 8 seed and go to Hopewell. Maybe 7 seed, maybe they play JM again. Maybe.
So these 2 3A teams that we talked about, Spotsy and JM, both have Region 4A teams that they will be playing this week. I'll get it out here. Eventually, I'll come around and spit it out. JM will be at home playing King George, and Spotsylvania is going to be on the road at Chancellor.
Yeah, and Chancellor and King George, that's 2 teams certainly with things to play for. Up in the 4A East now, if we want to keep moving our way up. Cortland, Easternview, Chancellor, Louisa, their spots are guaranteed. They are playoff teams for certain. I think Cortland is definitely the 1 seed in their pod of the 4A East. Easternview and Chancellor right now tied for 3 and 4. Easternview with a tiny little edge in possible points. I'm sorry, they're tied for 4th and 5th. Hanover's above them. And 3rd. So you're looking at Easternview and Chancellor, and maybe they're about to play each other again for the second time this year. Whoever outpoints the other maybe this week is possibly hosting that game.
It just struck a question in my mind. We didn't rehearse this, so I'm not sure that you know the answer. But if 2 teams do end up tied all the way out to the nth percentage, what's the tiebreaker procedure?
There's a list of 7 or 8 tiebreakers, that go to things like how many games did your opponents win, things like that. There's the average of your opponent's power points, things like that. There's about 7 or 8 of them that I usually have to think about and practice before Friday night of this week. And then let's not forget King George, of course. We talked about King George and Powhatan are the only 2 teams in the 4A in their pod of the 4A East who have not either clinched a playoff spot or been eliminated. One of them is going to the postseason. I'm pretty sure to play at Cortland in the first week of the playoffs. King George with a big advantage. I like the Foxes there. I think King George plays at Cortland next week in the first round of playoffs. Rematch.
Actually, if you were watching during our review of the previous games, previous week's games, I told the Foxes fans to book their tickets. I'm saying King George in the playoffs. Now that you tell me this stuff, I'm not quite so confident, but I'll still stand by
King
it.
George should be pretty confident. Their minimum, I don't want to get too into numbers.
Yeah,
their minimum is 22.0. That means everything goes against them this week.
Right.
Powhatan's maximum is 22.4. That means everything goes their way. So virtually for King George not to make the playoffs, everything would have to go against King George, including some crazy upsets that you don't think are possible, and everything would have to go for Powhatan.
And just for our viewers to make sure that they understand what you mean by everything. So that means all of the teams that King George has beaten and lost to would have to lose.
You want those teams to lose, exactly.
For it to be the worst, their minimum, and they would have to lose.
Yes.
And Powhatan, all the teams that they have beaten,
especially the teams they've beaten, those teams win. Yeah.
Win, and they would win.
Yeah.
Because you get the way the wire.
Yeah. Powhatan's really got to maximize, and King George has to minimize for the Foxes not to be the 8th seed in the playoffs. King George goes and gets a win. You know, can they move up? I think it's tough to move up. I think it's tough.
Okay. Speaking of move up, how about we skip a step and move up to the 6A South?
Sure, okay. Yeah.
So Riverbend has finished their season. Colonial Forge in good shape, though.
Colonial Forge definitely the 1 seed in the pod. And furthermore, because of how they structured the playoffs, they're going to play the pod, that's the 8-team, 2-conference grouping. They're going to play that down to 1 team. Colonial Forge will be at home. If they're alive, they will host those games until there is one of those 8 teams remaining.
That's a change from
from last year, exactly. Yeah. You know, they want to keep that Ocean Lakes Oscar Smith matchup in the region's hands and not in the region's hands and not a state semifinal game.
Right.
You know, so they want to keep that in the region's hands. So they're going to play that half down to 1 team. 6A South Conference 3 and 4, they're going to play that down to 1 team. And if Colonial Forge is alive, they'll be at home, including in the first round, where I think decent money, you're getting the Riverbend Bears again.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. That was a good game earlier this season.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Might be an interesting matchup there.
Sure.
Rematch.
And Riverbend is like King George, it should be said. They're not a lock. They're not a certainty.
Right.
But you like their minimum against James River of Chesterfield, their maximum. You like where Riverbend's at. They're in the same situation where everything would have to go against the Bears. All the teams, you know, that's Cortland losing, Chancellor losing, Massaponax losing, things like that. If those things go against Riverbend and then everything goes James River's way, then playoffs become questionable. But you know, you really think between some of those games that Riverbend play, Massaponax maybe got a chance to get them to the Rider Point. Cortland's got a chance to get him a Rider Point. Chancellor's got a chance to get him a Rider Point. You know,
Hilton's got a chance.
Hilton's got a chance. Yeah. You think there's enough good teams out there that Riverbend's playing.
Bears fans, book your tickets for the playoffs. Riverbend in the playoffs.
This guy
means nothing. You take a look at my track record.
Colonial Forge, maybe you're playing Hilton again. They're going to be the 2 seed. Maybe you play Hilton again.
The chip in the chair.
Chip in the chair. There you go. They're alive.
Now we skipped over the 5A North, and that's because this is maybe the most intriguing situation. Lots of variability, I guess. But let's get the easy one out of the way. I'm going to say Massaponax. They're in good shape.
Well, in good shape.
You thought I was going to say something else.
Doesn't take it too far.
Is in. Yes.
Every local 5A team, with the exception of Stafford, is in the 5A North playoffs. That includes Orange, Mountain View, North Stafford, Brook Point, Massaponax. They're all going to the postseason.
There you go.
And I think most of them, with the exception of Orange, will be at home in the first week of the postseason. You know, I think Mountain View and North Stafford, that's 7-2 Mountain View and 6-3 North Stafford. You know, that's a pretty big matchup. Right now, those 2 teams are side by side in the playoffs. In terms of getting maybe 1 up and 1 down, you know, that's going to sort of decide that. I don't think either of them jump into the top 4 of the conference, but the top 4 of the conference of the region is where it's at this week. It's an awesome, like if you were drawing up a bracket, you draw it up just like this. Broad Run is going to play Tuscarora. That's 7-2, 4th place Broad Run against 9-0, 2nd place Tuscarora. And of course, Massaponax is 9-0. They're playing Brook Point 8-1. So all the top 4 teams in the 5A North are going to play each other. It's going to be a cool Friday night.
Playoff before a playoff.
Yeah, a little bit of playoff. It's a playoff to set up that top 4. The question is, if Massaponax wins, do they stay ahead of, and Tuscarora wins, who stays at number 1? Massaponax with a slight advantage. Their minimums are tied. Massaponax with a 0.1 edge in their maximums. That's going to be really, really close. Massaponax wants Chancellor, Cortland, want those teams to win. Of course, Riverbend doesn't play, so that hurts them. But then all the other Conference 15 teams are going to, they've beaten them all, so that's moot. The Huskies got a little better advantage, I think, in that they have their schedules a little more diverse.
Right.
Now, the question, my favorite question is, let's say Broad Run beats Tuscarora, and Brook Point beats Massaponax. Can Brook Point jump and be the number 1 seed? I think yes.
Yeah?
I think the answer is yes. I think if you get that scenario where Brook Point beats Ponax and Broad Run wins, I think Brook Point jumps up and becomes the number 1 seed in the conference, and then maybe you're looking at Tuscarora and Massaponax 2-3 in some fashion, and then Broad Run staying at 4th.
So many intriguing scenarios here. Certainly Massaponax with their long regular season winning streak, it would be interesting to see if they were to lose a regular season game, what that might do to set them up into the playoffs. We know that the playoffs are a big deal for them. That's going to be a big matchup, though. I mean, a blowout, or maybe not a blowout. Wrong choice of words there. A very intriguing game between Brook Point and Massaponax. I think
certainly,
headlines.
We've talked about it.
Very strong.
We've seen all these Conference 15 opponents for Massaponax, and we've waited for one of them to be a good game. Last chance. Here we go.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. How about the performance of these Fredericksburg area teams, particularly in the 5A North?
Yeah, I don't know if you did the math. 17 of 19.
17 of
19 public school teams are, I think, pretty well. They're going to be in the playoffs.
Yeah, there you
17
go.
of 19.
That's an awfully impressive record. Certainly proud of the work that the schools have put in to be able to make the postseason. But there is still 1 week left for almost every team from around the area. Big playoff implications, if not to make the playoffs, at least to set up the seeding for this. Lots of good football to be played. Can you believe we're at the end of the regular season?
We're here.
Where did the season go?
Absolutely.
How about that? It's been fun, but there's still plenty of fun left. Hope that you're able to get out and see one of these wonderful Fredericksburg area high school football games.